Thank you, Sherry. First of all, again, thanks to the other Claire and to Matt and to Sherry for bringing us all together. I completely share your ambitions for this afternoon, particularly with our over 1,000 women entrepreneurs and students who've joined us today. So welcome to all of you. And, as Sherry said earlier, I think this afternoon is really about sort of sharing, about learning, about sort of really giving you some lessons from some women leaders who've really been sort of paving the way and really working through some quite challenging times as well. I personally can't think of a better woman leader to join me for this conversation this afternoon as Clare Gilmartin. Clare, who I know well, was appointed CEO of Trainline back in 2014 and has really led the company through quite exceptional growth. So welcome, Clare. I'm thrilled to have you with us today. And as you've heard, we've got lots and lots of women entrepreneurs with us today. Some of them running really small businesses, some of them running scale-ups. We've also got some students with us today. So I thought it would be nice to kick off really for you just to share a little bit of your journey and your sort of career and how you became the CEO of Trainline.
Thanks very much, Janet, and thanks Sherry and Claire and Matt as well. And well done to all of you, 1,100 out there, budding entrepreneurs or existing entrepreneurs. So my journey started in Dublin, where I grew up. I took my first job in the UK. So I came to London, worked for Unilever in marketing and sales. And then I moved on to be a consultant for a few years. I thought it was my working woman's MBA, as in an MBA without the cost. And then I went to eBay in the early 2000s when I had an inkling that maybe the internet would be a big thing. And I grew up there really over 10 years. And 6 or 7 years ago, I decided to take the leap and go out on my own as a CEO. And I think the common thread, and I'm post-rationalizing, was in each of those choices, I always took something or took roles where I was a bit scared, where I wasn't quite sure if I was going to be able for it. And the other thing I think that's driven me is a deep-rooted belief that we will have a better world if it's as much led by women as by men. And I've been very feisty and bloody-minded about that. I believe as a generation, all of us here today can make that happen.
Wow, I love that. I love the feistiness, and I suppose that sort of feistiness and true grit is probably what makes you such a great CEO. But over the years since 2014, I know that you've made quite a few changes at Trainline. Can you sort of share with us what those changes were and what impact those changes have had on the growth of the business?
Yeah, so I joined the business in 2014. It was a UK only business. But I could see that the customer need was really global. We sell rail tickets around the world. And in doing that, we're championing a much greener way of traveling. But to globalize the business or internationalize the business, it required a big upfront investment in technology and in the platform. So again, a leap of faith. We had to bring profitability down in order to increase the size of our future market. But it paid off, and we went from one country to 40 plus countries, 20 odd carrier partners to now nearly 300. And I guess along the journey as well, I expanded the team and invested in the team. I have always hired people who I think are super smart, but very low ego. So we're always solving problems and seeking to do better tomorrow than we did today. But I've also made sure that I'm surrounded by people who have complementary skills to me. I always think a CEO is a bit of a jack of all trades, but I've got some amazing people around me.
Fantastic. I mean, it's all about the talent, isn't it? But I know as part of that growth journey, you've really had to sort of bring your customers with you, and you've done a lot of work around listening to your customers. But how did you manage to sort of bring them with you online from what was traditionally quite an offline industry, wasn't it, before?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Rail and train travel, unlike, say, air, was and really still is predominantly bought offline. And for people around the world, that means the hassle of standing in queues in train stations. And I think we had a deep-rooted belief 6 or 7 years ago, it remains absolutely true today, that if you digitize it, you digitize all the ticketing, you put the tickets into a phone, you give people personalized on-the-go information, that actually people will end up taking the train more, which in turn will be a good thing for the environment, a good thing for governments. And so it really has been holding the line on that the whole way through, especially this year, investing behind that long-term belief that if you digitize, you lower the friction for customers, they in turn will travel more. And that will also, as I said, help us as a society because we will reduce transport emissions.
So sticking with the same theme, all the entrepreneurs who are with us today, all dialing in, any tips for those entrepreneurs who are really wanting to try and build a customer base? How did you listen to your customers? Did you do surveys? Did you go and talk to them?
I guess the key rule is you never stop, and it's never been more important as it has been this year, honestly. For us, we're two-sided marketplaces, so we spend a lot of time listening to customers. We have customers in all of our offices all the time, and we're watching them use our products. We go out into train stations. But then in terms of our carrier partners, our suppliers, the train companies, the bus companies, I spend a lot of time face to face with those people, with the CEOs and the CIOs of those businesses, just to keep, I guess, a finger on the pulse on their needs. And as I said, this year in particular, given the amount of change in travel, it's never been more important to listen to customers. I guess one of my big learnings along my career, most of the breakthrough ideas have come from face-to-face experiences with customers.
Yeah. So you've invested in your customers, invest in your partners, as you say, you've invested in your people and in your technology. So that's all really impressive. And when we now think about more recent times and this sort of global pandemic that we're all found ourselves in over the last few months, what changes did you then have to put in place, both as a leader of all your team, but also for the business?
Yeah, and being clear, travel obviously has been impacted hugely, and I'm sure many of the folks leading businesses in the audience today will also be in sectors deeply impacted.
Yeah.
So when all the lockdown restrictions hit first in March, our priority went very quickly to our customers and trying to automate all the changes that they wanted to make as quickly as possible. And we had daily stand-ups and it was crisis mode. And we did, in fact, a lot of the terms and conditions and everything else were changing in the industry. We took pride in the fact that we're a digital engineering-led business and we automated on the hoof. And actually, we're able to deliver just a great customer experience, even in the context of that crisis. I think after that, we had to act very decisively in the short run to protect the long-term health of the business. Yeah. And honestly, I've been in business 20 plus years. I had no global pandemic playbook. So there was nothing I could draw from. But we did take decisions, very short-term or very quick decisions to reduce our cost base. And our motive was always to protect the long-term health of the business, because we believed that whilst there would be short-term volatility, the long-term opportunity remains unchanged. And, throughout this period, therefore, whilst we've taken some costs out, we have continued to invest in innovation and the things that will drive long-term digitization and ultimately then greener travel.
Yeah, I've always been struck about your focus on the long term, Claire, which has always been very impressive and probably why you've been able to grow the business so well. And then because of your sort of long term vision and also the way that you've grown internationally, in the travel industry, we have seen some sort of train industry in other parts of the world, not in the UK, actually rise, haven't you? Some people are traveling on trains more, actually. Have you then sort of pivoted over the last few months and really put more investment into some of the markets other than the UK?
Well, yeah, I think the fact that we internationalize and globalize the business has actually made us more resilient through this period. So lockdown was longer in the UK than it was in, say, Germany or Italy or France. And therefore, we saw our business in those places rebound faster. We were therefore able to move some of our investment around to capitalize on the fact that those markets were recovering faster. It also, helped our belief that travel would return eventually once restrictions were reduced. Now, clearly, we are still, let's be honest, we're still in a phase of what I would kindly call short-term volatility in the travel industry. But, I spend a lot of time with my teams helping people decipher the short-term volatility from the long-term opportunity, because I think to stay sane and to stay on track, that distinction is really critical.
Really important as well to help the resilience of your teams, no doubt. And how have you managed to sort of stay resilient as a leader? Because I'm sure it hasn't been easy.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny, I think I said, I shared with you before, Janet, when I asked for advice as I was becoming a CEO the first time, I got lots of advice from lots of current CEOs, but no one told me to look after myself. And that's the first piece of advice that I would give any CEO or any budding entrepreneur. Your own well-being always has to be your priority, especially in a year like this. So invest in the things that keep you sane. After that, as I said, I think importantly, distinguishing short-term volatility from long-term is really important. And, use your long-term purpose to inspire others, because everybody sees the negative press every day surrounding this virus. It is important, assuming your purpose is valid in the long run, to keep talking about it. And, I think other things, women can be very empathetic leaders at a time like this in general, but even more especially at a time like this. So encouraging your teams to look after themselves as well. Many people are working very differently, much more remote. And so encouraging your companies and your teams to be having open discussions around well-being, I think, is super important.
Yeah, and anything else that you've done with your teams in a sort of this environment that you feel have really helped and might be really sort of helpful to other people on this event today?
Yeah, I think I've increased we have 700 or 800 people. I've increased communications massively. So I talk to the whole company every week. And sometimes it's very informal and sometimes it's more formal. We continue to invest in some of the more grassroots societal missions that we're on, investing in coaching in schools. We've built a school. We invest in encouraging more women to code. Those things are really important, again, at a time like this, for people to latch on to. And, the other thing we spoke about already today, listening to customers. Customer needs are changing. And I continue to get great ideas. Out of every crisis, I think, comes some opportunity. I continue to get great ideas from both motivation and great ideas from talking directly to customers.
Oh, no, brilliant. I mean, yeah, customers, communication, that's what I've heard the most of, I think, over the last few months, in terms of leaders who are really managing to keep their teams motivated and look after their wellness through this time. I think collaboration, communication, and keep an eye on the customers. And given that we've got people with us today, some of them who might just be starting out, or they were starting their business 6 months ago, and they're now clearly having to face these really challenging times, and no one had a crystal ball that this was going to happen. We're sort of going to have to wrap this up soon and hand over to our panel, but I'd love to sort of invite you, Claire, just to sort of share one or two pieces of advice that maybe the advice that you wish you'd had when you started out on your journey, that could really help the people who are with us on the call today, as they're maybe thinking towards their long-term vision. Any little nuggets of advice that you could share with them?
Yeah, I'm sure I've touched on most of this already, but look after yourself. For me, it's yoga, meditation, and exercise, but you need to be clear thinking and sound in mind. So really look after yourself. Surround yourself by good people who have complementary skills, but are low ego and hungry in the same way that you are to grow your business. And, listen to your customers. all the kinds of things we've already spoken about, I think.
Really helpful advice. And yeah, I hope you go on to continue to be hugely successful with Trainline, Claire. I'm a massive fan. I use it all the time. And really appreciate all the lessons that you've shared with us today, all the tips. I'm sure everyone on the call will also be sort of scribbling away like I've been doing, and hopefully take some of this away and start to implement some new ways of leading their teams and leading their businesses. So thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Janet.